Hi S7s, today we're going to be looking at finishes, and finishes basically how you finish your practical work, okay, what it's going to look like and what it might need in order to help it be protected. So they're used for two reasons. First one, aesthetics, which is just another word for how you how something looks, whether it looks nice, whether it's pretty, you like looking at it, okay. So aesthetics is to make your material look nice. Now, for instance, if you're using something like MDF, it's not the prettiest looking thing in the world. You may want to paint it, you might want to colour it or change it somehow, so that would affect the way it looks, okay. Secondly, you've got your function. All right, now that's quite simple. You need to protect the material you've used, so you're going to add something to it. So if your piece of work is going to be outside, there are things like the sun, water from the rain, things like that, which will diminish its aesthetic look for a start. It'll start to make it look not as nice to look at, but it can also start to rot and, you know, make it deteriorate. So the function is to protect, okay. So you have two reasons for finishes: making it look pretty and nice, and also protecting it from something such as water or oils or anything like that, okay. Right, so first of all we're going to look at painting. So this is one of the ways of finishing your work, all right. So it can be used obviously for changing the colour of the timber that you've got. Like I said, if you're using an MDF, it's not the prettiest thing in the world, so you may want to change that to make it look more appropriate. You might have a colour scheme in your house that you want to match, so you might use a paint to cover it, okay. Also, you can get different textures in the paint. It can be glossy, it could be silky, it can be what's called matte, so it hasn't got a sheen to it. And you decide what finish you want from that. Alright, again, paint has a protective layering to it as well. It stops things like water getting into it. So if you've got a toy that sits outside, or something that you know is going to get wet, leaving it just raw is going to end up having it deteriorate. Okay, now, so the advantages of painting is obviously you can change the colour and texture of it. That's pretty much the first thing that you would probably be thinking about. If we're in year 7 doing a project, you'll get MDF, you'll want to colour it to what you want it, okay. You might want to put texture on it, and also it's good at protecting that piece of timber from the environment, whether it's rain, you know, liquidy water, or whether it's things like the sun. The sun can start to make your timber deteriorate as well. Now, the disadvantages of it is that you do have to prepare your timber beforehand. You can't just paint it straight on. You will have to do a little bit of preparation beforehand, because the paint needs something to cling on to. Okay, so you'd have to sand it, a little bit of light sanding, just so it roughens your surface a little bit. So when you paint on, the paint will stick to it. Okay. Now you would do that, let it dry, then you would do that again. You get very light sandpaper, lightly sand it again, so that you get another layer, and you build up layer by layer, and you will get a nice finish. Okay, sometimes when you paint, you get little sort of ridges and lines in your paint. So once it's dry, you get your sander, get your sandpaper on it, and then you can sand it down flat again. You'll still have the colour, but you'll have flattened off the texture if you want it nice and smooth, and then you put another layer on. And it's about building up your layers, so that, and it is sort of time consuming. You can't just bang it on and leave it and that'll be it. You have to have a little think about it, because once you've got to the finishing stage, that's the bit you see. That's the bit people will notice. So it's got to be done well. You know, a lot of things get ruined by just taking ages on cutting and sanding everything down, making it smooth, and then whacking a load of paint on top without much thought. So it is time consuming, and you do need a bit of skill to get a good finish. Okay, so now we're going to look at varnishing. Okay, now its function, what it's for, is to make your timber waterproof. Okay, it stops anything getting in, and it forms a layer on top of your timber, and it stops liquids getting in and ruining the wood. Okay, aesthetically it changes the texture, again just the same as paint will. So you've got your matte, you've got a satin, you've got a gloss finish, but it can also enhance the timber. If you look at this picture here, you can see here where this bit here hasn't been varnished, but this bit has, and it's starting to bring out the different aspects of the timber. It makes it look really much more effective. You can see the knots in it. People like to see, if they've got natural wood, they like to see the grain and the knots and the imperfections in it, because that's what makes natural wood something nice to look at. Okay, so it can change, when it says here, change some of the tone. That's what it's talking about. You can see there it looks dull and a bit uninteresting. As soon as you put the varnish on, the grain pops right out. Okay, so a varnish can be used to enhance the look of it. Alright, now it's used obviously on things like wooden flooring, because that's heavy traffic, people walk on it a lot, you drop things on it, you might drop things which are heavy, so you want something which has got a tough finish that's not going to just crack or anything like that. Boats, they sit in water all the time, so you know it's really important that they are sealed. And also furniture, you know, your tables, you might drop drinks on it, etc, etc. It needs to be protected. So varnishing is very good at protecting your timbers, but again it's also very good at bringing out and enhancing the timber. You wouldn't technically really want to use this on MDF, for instance, because MDF hasn't got any grain or knots or anything interesting about it. You can use it to stop liquids getting in, but it's not going to enhance the look of it in any way. Okay, unlike wood, unlike paint would. Again, so advantages, it changes the texture of the wood. Okay, it changes the way it looks. You can keep the same colour, but you can enhance it in a way. This one here, for instance, you could get a neutral varnish, which would still be enhancing these sort of grains here, but maybe not to the point of this one, which is, that looks quite a golden varnish. That's probably got a colour in it. Okay, so you can get coloured varnishes, but you can also use a clear one. All right, it's good at protecting everything from the environment. And again, the disadvantage is it does need careful preparation. Again, we're going to go through a slide about that, and your end of task will be looking at making a information sheet on how to prepare your timber for either varnishing or painting. It's up to you, but I'll get back to that in a bit. So quite simply, you've got the steps to painting and varnishing. You can use this to help you go through and create your fact sheet on how to do it, but it's pretty simple. Okay, it's just like we said earlier, it's time consuming. You've got to sand your surface. Once you've finished making it, it needs to be sanded. Get rid of the dust, because that will sit there. You won't necessarily see much of it, but if you wipe your hand over it, you'll get a very sort of fine pale white dust all over your hands. And if you paint varnish over that, that is going to sit in the varnish and give you little sort of a rough finish to it. So if you put a gloss varnish on it, it's still going to feel rough and lumpy because it's got that dust, those dust particles in it. Okay, so you've got to dust it off. Some woods may need sealing first. Okay, again, if you're doing paint, you might want to seal it with PVA, because that will stop any of the moisture from the paint getting into the wood as well. So if you do an MDF, you may need to put a layer of PVA white glue over it first, let that dry, which acts as a seal, and then paint it. Okay, so then you got to wait for your first layer to dry, sand it again, and apply another layer, and you keep doing that until you get it to the finish you want. And again, it has to be dry in between. You can't sort of sand it while it's damp, it's not going to work. You can't reapply anything while it's damp because you can't sand it. So you have to go through these steps, laborious steps that they are, in order to get the finish. And like I said, you know, the finish is what's important in the end. That's what people are going to see. So the last part of this is what's called tanalising. Alright, now this is something which is a industrial process. Okay, it's not something that you would do at home, like, oh, I'm going to go and tanalise my gate. This is something that is done before the product is made. Okay, and it works by forcing a preserving liquid into the actual wood itself. Alright, so it penetrates into the cells of the wood, and it doesn't just sit on top. So if you cut a little bit off the, you know, shaved a bit of timber away, that bit underneath is protected. That wouldn't happen if you had varnished. If you shaved away the varnish, that would be gone. Okay, so it goes into the timber to a certain degree, which gives it a deeper protection. Now, aesthetically speaking, the way it looks, it comes out, it looks like a honey colour. You can see on here there, that is what it would come out looking like. You don't get lots of different colours or anything in this, but it will over time start to go a little bit greyer, a little bit sort of drabber, I guess you'd say. It would look a bit drab, and some people don't really like that, but it's still protected. It's just the colours changed with your elements outside. Okay, so the advantage of tanalising is that it does give you a very long time of protection. You don't have to go out, especially if you've got garden fencing or gates. You don't have to go out every other summer to reapply something like a varnish or an oil to keep it protected. It's done, and it can last 10 years or more. All right. However, it's not a particularly pleasant look after it's weathered a bit. So, and you can't get back to that original honey colour because obviously you are not going to be tanalising it. Okay, so it depends what you want with this one. I'm going to show you a quick diagram of it, just to go through it again. So this is the process. So here you have like a chamber, and what you do is you put the timber in, and that will then be closed off, and what happens is that you have a vacuum which sucks all the air out. Okay, so what then is, while the air is all sucked out, they're going to put in what's called tanalith, which is the preserving liquid, and then you apply hydraulic pressure, water pressure to it here, which pushes the tanalith into it. So you can see here how it's not just sitting around the edges, it's going into this block of wood. All right, so it won't go all the way through, it's not going all the way, but it's going deeper down, so you're getting that deeper protection. All right, it's going into the cells, and it's going to stay there. Then you'll drain all the excess out. All right, and then it will be all that's sucked out, and then you've got here where you can see that once it's all finished, you've got this deep protection all the way into it, which gives it the ability, if you cut it, so if I cut a piece off here, for instance, that bit was gone, it would still be protected here because it's gone into it. All right, so it's something which you would use, like I said, for things like outside, where you don't want to be constantly having to paint it and protect it every year. Okay, now your task this week is again just a little fill in the blanks. Remember what I said last time, the little numbers here might not correlate with the thing, that it's just to say that there is a word missing. All right, so don't get bogged down with how many dashes they are. That's activity 1, that shouldn't take too long. And activity 2 is to produce a step-by-step varnishing or painting. It's up to you which one you want to do. But like I said, remember, if you were using MDF, which is the manufactured boards that we looked at last week, they're not particularly pretty, so you might want to choose paint for that. If you're looking at a natural timber that you're going to do, you would use maybe a varnish or an oil similar to that to show off the grain and the particularly nice features of the wood. Okay, so that is your task for today.